Tonight's story is called Little Red Riding Hood and the Grandmother's Fire, a cozy bedtime story made just for you. Hello, dear dreamer. You've done enough today. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your breath slow. Let your heart unclench. You are safe now. The world can wait. Here, in this quiet space, stories begin again. Tonight's tale is about courage that hides inside tenderness and the kind of love that burns steady, even in the dark. So take a deep breath. Let the day fall away. Let every sound soften around you. The world will wait. The story will not rush you. It will keep watch while you drift into the softest kind of peace. Now, let's begin. The night is settling over the valley, like a soft blue hush before a prayer. Somewhere inside that hush, a window glows. You can almost smell it. Yeast and honey, and the faint curl of wood and smoke. That's the home of the girl in the red hood. Her mother kneads bread at the table, hands dusted white with flour. And her father, he hums the tune he always hums when he's trying not to worry. They are simple people, sturdy, kind, and love sits thick in that room, like butter melting into warm bread. Tonight, the talk at the table is of grandmother, the old woman who lives alone where the forest grows deepest. The villagers speak of her often, though not always kindly. They call her peculiar, hard-eyed, a bit touched by the woods. Once, she was anything but. When her husband lived, she was known for the strength in her arms and for the quickness in her wit. She helped him fell trees, haul stone, mend fences, work most men grumbled about. She even wore trousers, if the day demanded it, and when her errands took her to the tavern, she'd sit with the farmers, drink a barley beer, and best any of them in a game of dice. She could carve a beam straight, judge the worth of a thing by touch alone, and spot a crooked scale faster than the merchant could blink. Smart as a whip she was, they said back then, and they'd mean it. But time is a fickle friend. After her husband died, the cottage in the woods grew quieter, and her visits to the village fewer. Her eyes dimmed, her hearing went soft around the edges, and the tidy bun of her youth gave way to the wild wisps of silver hair. People began to whisper that she muttered to herself, that she bumped into things, that she'd grown mean, suspicious. They forgot the woman she had been and saw only the strangeness of change. Little by little, the villagers stopped waving when she came to market. Her name became a caution, a story told to children who strayed out too late. Not only of cruelty, exactly, but out of the easy comfort of misunderstanding. It happens, doesn't it, dear dreamer? How we sometimes look away from those who live differently, the ones whose voices wobble, whose ways unsettle our tidy sense of normal. We call them curious or difficult or lost, when all they've really done is keep being themselves in a world that prefers sameness. At the table, Red listens to her parents' gentle fretting. Take her the cake and the butter, her mother says, and remind her she's loved. Red nods. She knows her grandmother is peculiar, but she has never been afraid of her, only fascinated. The woods that make others nervous feel to Red like a secret world she already belongs to. Her father brings down the red hood, velvet worn thin, the color of late summer berries. He drapes it over her shoulders, ties the ribbon tightly beneath her chin. "Straight to grandmother's," he says. "No shortcuts, no strangers." Red smiles, but her eyes are already at the tree line, where the evening mist curls like breath. Have you ever felt that pull, dear one? The tug between safety and the wide unknown? That's where every story begins. Red takes her basket and steps out into the evening. The door closes behind her. That gentle, hollow sound that means love and worry and hope all at once. Her mother watches from the window until the red hood becomes a moving spark between the pines. Her father listens for her footsteps, long after the forest swallows them. And somewhere, deeper in those woods, an old woman stirs her soup, half hearing a sound she can't quite name, and wonders if the world remembers her at all. The kettle sighs, the bread cools, and the forest waits. The air changed the moment she left the last fence behind. The smell of bread and hearth gave way to pine and damp moss, to the green hush that only the forest knows how to keep. Red's basket bumped against her knee as she walked, a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat she could hold in her hand. Above her, branches crossed and recrossed, letting down ribbons of light that quivered and vanished with each step. Every few paces she stopped, to touch a fern still wet with rain, to listen to the far-off tap of a woodpecker, to watch a squirrel scold her from a limb. The forest was alive, but not in a way that frightened her. It was the sort of living that felt like company. She thought of her grandmother as she walked, of stories her mother told, half worry, half love. She wondered if the old woman truly was as strange as people said, or as if strangeness simply came with knowing too much of solitude. The thought made her smile. She liked the idea of growing wild one day too, rooted and certain, tended by nothing but the seasons themselves, like a flower the earth had chosen for that particular patch of light, not needing much, a little sun, a little rain, giving back far more, color, fragrance, a softness for every wandering eye, the kind of bloom people call a weed until they kneel close enough to see its beauty. Her grandmother, she thought, was that sort of flower, and perhaps, in time, she would be too. She hummed a tune, the one her father used when he worked the fields. The melody skipped over the roots and around the stones, and for a time the forest seemed to hum back. Then the light shifted. What had been golden turned to silver, the kind that slides between the shadows. And somewhere behind her, a footfall. She turned. Nothing but the quiver of leaves. Still, she felt it. A gaze, a weight of attention. Out from the shade stepped the wolf. Tall, sleek, coat shining like river water in moonlight. Not the shaggy thing of bedtime warnings, but something elegant, almost regal. His eyes were amber, and they caught the last pieces of the day, the way glass catches fire. He smiled, if wolves can even smile. "Good afternoon, little traveler." His voice was low, warm as fur, smooth as creek stone. Where does such a bright-colored girl go all alone through the forest? Red hesitated. Her parents' voices rose in her head. No shortcuts, Red. No strangers. But he didn't look like danger. He looked like a storybook knight who'd misplaced his horse. I'm going to my grandmother's cottage, she said. She isn't well. I'm bringing her cake and butter. Ah, said the wolf, lowering his head slightly. A fine errand of love. And does your grandmother live far from here? Beyond the mill, Red answered. The last cottage before the stream bends. The wolf nodded, as if he were memorizing a secret map. He kept his eyes on her steady, polite. Too polite. I'll not keep you, he said finally. The woods can be confusing for the young. Stay to the path, little one. And with that, he slipped between the trees, a shadow folding itself into deeper shade. Red watched the place where he had vanished. For a moment, the forest was still. Then a single crow called, and the spell of silence broke. She took a deep breath, lighter than she expected, and started forward again. She told herself he was only being kind. Still, her footsteps quickened. The path wound deeper, the air cooler, the light drifting toward twilight. So often, we meet the lesson long before we understand it. We mistake curiosity for safety, attention for affection. But stories have patience, dear dreamer. They let us walk a while before they show their teeth. The forest opened to a small clearing, and in the middle of it stood a cottage, stone at the bottom, timber at the top. Its roof bowed with moss like an old head remembering youth. Inside, the grandmother was at her table. She moved carefully now. She had learned the rhythm of creaking joints, the way some people learn a song. The kettle steamed. A pot of stew murmured on the hearth, and a pair of knitting needles clacked softly in her lap, their sound of the ticking of her quiet clock. She was still strong in the body, but the years had scattered her senses like leaves across the path. Sometimes her eyes betrayed her, the shapes of furniture bending into strangers. Sometimes her ears made mischief, bringing her echoes of voices that weren't there. She learned to speak back to them gently, as if they were wayward children. The villagers would call that madness. She called it company. Outside the window, the light thinned, and the forest began to change its tone. Day birds settling, night wings testing the air. She liked this hour best, when everything seemed to hover between what was and what might be. She spooned a taste of stew, nodded to herself, and muttered, "Needs time." Her own time, grown in clay pots along the sill, sharp, green, defiant against the shadows. And then there was a knock, soft, but wrong. Not the polite tap of her granddaughter's hand. Not the brisk thump of a villager with a message or a basket to trade. This knock was weighty, deliberate. 3 slow beats that made the spoons tremble in their jar. She froze. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the crack of fire. Then another knock. Lower this time. Her breath thinned. She reached for her cane, not for walking, but for listening. She used it to feel the air before her, to sense the closeness of danger. "Who's there?" she called. Her voice wobbled, but did not break. Silence. The stew hissed in its pot, a single bubble rising and bursting like it held a thought. She took a step toward the door, then stopped. Her heart knew something her eyes could not. She turned instead to the small pantry. Behind the sacks of flour, beneath a false plank, was a hatch leading to a cramped cellar her husband had once used for storing apples and cider. She had kept it clean, though no one knew. Old habits, old instincts. She lifted the hatch and climbed down, the candle shaking in her hand. The space was close and cool. She sat on a crate, pulled the door almost shut, and waited. Above her, the latch rattled. The door creaked open. A draft swept through the house, carrying with it the smell of wild earth, damp fur, the metallic hint of hunger. The grandmother pressed a hand to her chest and whispered a name she hadn't said in years, as if calling on her husband's ghost. Floorboards groaned. The kettle sang a final thin note and went quiet. She kept still, counting each breath until even fear had to breathe with her. Then she heard it, a soft drag of claws on wood, the murmur of a voice trying to sound like a man's, a rustle of cloth. Upstairs, the wolf found her gown, her cap, her bed. Down below, in the dark, the old woman kept her candle steady, its flame a single promise against the dark. The latch lifted with a sigh, and the door eased inward. Cool air slid across the floor, curling around the legs of the table, stirring the ashes in the hearth. The wolf stepped inside. He paused, nostrils flaring, testing the scent of bread, time, and fear. He expected clutter, perhaps, or company, but the house met him with stillness, that strange, deliberate kind of stillness that feels almost like listening. He moved softly, pads silent on the wood. His amber eyes caught the candle's reflection, turning the room to gold for a heartbeat. Then shadow again. On the wall hung a shawl, frayed but clean. On the chair, a folded gown. The wolf touched the fabric with the tip of his muzzle. A human scent, fading but distinct. He walked to the table, sniffed the stew. The aroma rose, warm and rich, and for a moment the hunger in him was not for the flesh, but for comfort, for the kind of life that owned spoons and soft chairs, that measured time by the singing of a kettle. He looked around, and for the first time in his restless days, he felt envy. The bed stood near the hearth, the covers drawn back as if expecting someone. He ran a claw lightly along the quilt's edge, then began to change his shape, not truly, but in gesture. He pulled the gown over his shoulders, clumsy but careful, the cap over his big ears. He tucked his tail beneath the blanket and lay back, the fire painting his fur in flickers of human color. Down below, the grandmother heard each movement, the scrape of the chair, the faint sigh as the bed took weight. She held her breath until it hurt, then let it out slowly, and the candle flame steadied. Upstairs, the wolf practiced stillness. He turned his head towards the door, listened to the forest breathing outside, and thought he heard a tune, a girl's voice, far off, humming. He smiled. Such a tender sound threading through the trees. He adjusted the blanket, smoothed the quilt over his paws, and whispered to the empty room, "Come along, little red one. I am waiting." The house, obedient and ancient, kept his secret. Only the kettle, forgotten on the hearth, gave a small, anxious hiss. Twilight had settled into that thin silver that makes every path look the same. Red walked faster, basket swinging at her side, the handle leaving a faint red line in her palm. Through the trees she saw the first hint of smoke, a gray thread curling from the chimney. Relief warmed her cheeks. "Nearly there," she whispered, and began to hum. The cottage came into view, the stones, the window, the crooked door standing slightly open. That was strange. Grandmother never left her door unlatched. She said the forest had too many opinions. Red knocked lightly. "Grandmother, it's me." From inside came a voice high, stretched thin, like a bowstring pulled too tight. "Come in, my dear." She frowned. "Grandmother, are you not feeling well? You sound like you swallowed a frog." A pause, then the answer, quick and nervous. "Oh, nothing serious, child. Just a tickle in my throat." Red pushed the door open, stepping into warmth and lamplight. The air smelled of stew and smoke and something else, something faintly sour, like wet fur drying by a fire. It prickled the small hairs along her arms. Her instincts stirred. Her heart told her the room was not what it seemed. Still, she took off her hood, shook out her hair, and began to wander the small room, taking it in as she always did. "You've been cooking again. I can smell carrots. And thyme, of course. Look how your thyme has grown." She went to the windowsill, brushing her fingertips across the tiny leaves to release their earthy scent. "They're as wild as anything, Grandmother. You said they'd never survive the winter, but they did. See? You were wrong this time." "Indeed," croaked the voice from the bed. Her back still turned. Red smiled at the sound, though it was different, hoarse, muffled, cautious. "Did you trim the curtains?" she went on, peering at the faded lace. "And your kettle, you polished it. It's shining." She moved toward the hearth, lifted the spoon from the pot, and tasted the stew. Still warm, perfectly salted. "You did remember the salt. You always forget." Behind her, the figure on the bed gave a low chuckle that wasn't quite right. Red froze for half a heartbeat, spoon halfway to her lips, then set it gently back into the pot. She turned. "Grandmother?" "Yes, child." Red studied the face half hidden in the shadow. The cap sat oddly. The chin seemed longer. She took a step closer, cautious and curious, the way one approaches a fox caught in a trap. "Are you sure you're all right? You look different." "Come nearer so I can see you," the voice urged. She obeyed, though every instinct told her to stay back. Her hand brushed the bedpost. The wood felt slick with heat. "Grandmother?" she said slowly. "What big ears you have." "All the better to hear you with, my dear." "Well, you always did hear everything, even when Mama muttered under her breath." Her gaze slid lower. "What big eyes you have." "All the better to see you with." "And what big hands you have." "All the better to hold you with." She frowned. The smell of wet animal growing stronger now, curling under the sweetness of the stew and herbs. Her fingers tightened around the ribbon at her throat. "Grandmother?" she whispered. "What big teeth you have." The smile widened, sharp teeth gleaming. "All the better to eat you with." The words snapped through the room like a branch breaking. Red screamed pure, fierce, the sound of both terror and defiance. Down below, in the cellar, the grandmother heard that cry. Not a plea, but a battle call. It struck her through her chest like a spark finding dry tinder. The fire of the woman she had always been roared to life. She rose, steady and sure, candle in hand, flame unflinching. The years had slowed her limbs, but not her purpose. This was the woman who had always gone toward the noise, towards the danger, toward whatever needed doing. She pressed her shoulder to the cellar door. It gave with a groan. Up she climbed, each step ringing with certainty. The house above her trembled, but she did not. The scream still hung in the rafters when the wolf lunged. Red darted sideways, quick as thought, the hem of her cloak snatched by claws but not torn. The table tipped. The stew pot crashed, splattering broth and carrots across the floor. The scent of spice and iron filled the room. She grabbed the nearest thing, an iron ladle slick with heat, and swung. It met fur and bone with a sound that wasn't triumph but warning. The wolf snarled, more startled than hurt, and then grew angry, fur bristling, eyes narrowing at her sheer refusal to submit to the inevitable, at the gall of a small girl daring to fight back. He lunged again, teeth flashing beneath the grandmother's borrowed cap. Red ducked beneath the hearth, breath quick and sharp. Her small hands tightened around the ladle. She stood her ground. Down below, the grandmother reached the top step. The cellar door gave a groan as she shoved it open, and the sound drew the wolf's head around. He froze, uncertain which heartbeat to chase first. Grandmother stepped into the light. Her candle flickered once, then burned steady. A flame answered a challenge. "Get away from her," she growled, her voice low and rough, a sound pulled from the same wild place that had raised her child and felled her firewood and faced down winters without flinching. The wolf bared his teeth. "Old bones," he sneered. She smiled then, fearless. "You'll find them hard to chew." He lunged. She met him head on, the iron poker from the hearth raised high. The blow caught him across the shoulder, and his growl turned into a howl. He stumbled back, clawing at the floorboards, sending the basket of cake and butter tumbling, its contents scattering across the planks. Red sprang from the corner, seized the kettle from the hearth, and flung its scalding contents toward him. He shrieked, twisting away, smoke rising where the liquid met his skin. Grandmother struck again, once, twice, not wild, but precise, deliberate. Each swing landed with the clean certainty of a blacksmith's hammer, a rhythm of strength remembered, a fury honed by years of work and weather. She did not tremble. She did not miss. Every blow said what words never could. "You will not touch what is mine." The wolf staggered toward the open door, stumbling into the night. He made it as far as the edge of the clearing before his legs gave out, and he fell into the dark grass, silent at last. Inside, the two of them, child and woman, stood still, listening to the quiet reclaim the room. The fire popped softly, spitting a single ember into the air before settling again. Red's hands trembled. Tears streaked her cheeks, hot and confused and human. She wiped them with her sleeve, and in the same breath, her grandmother crossed the room, pulled her close, and held her tight. "There now," the old woman whispered into her hair. "It's over, my brave one. It's over." Red buried her face against her grandmother's shoulder, and for the first time since she'd entered the cottage, the world felt right again. Grandmother leaned back just enough to look at her. "You've got my fire," she said, softly but certain. Red sniffed, managing a smile, a shaky one. "I think you still have yours." And then the grandmother laughed. It wasn't the polite sound of a lady at market or the thin chuckle of a woman with a bit too much wine in her. It was a full and bold and alive laugh, the kind of laugh that rolls through timber and shakes the dust from the beams. It fills the eaves, rattles the windows, and made the fire flare bright as if to join in. It was strong and sure, and it was the most beautiful sound either of them ever heard. Outside, the forest listened, and for once, it had nothing to say. By morning, the forest had changed its tune. The air was lighter now, rinsed clean by night's small thunder. Mist floated lower over the grass, curling around the fallen wolf like smoke fading from a quenched fire. People would speak of him for centuries to come, but they would never fear him again. Inside the cottage, the hearth glowed steady. The red hood hung drying near the fire, and 2 pairs of boots stood side by the door, one large, one small, both dusted with ash. The grandmother stirred a new pot of stew, her hands still strong, though nicked from the fight. When Red woke, blinking at the morning light, the first thing she saw was her grandmother at the hearth, moving as if nothing in the world had dared to stop her. "Morning, my love," the old woman said. Her voice was scratchy but warm, like gravel warmed in the sun. "Sit yourself down. We'll eat what's left of the good carrots." Red smiled sleepily and did as she was told. They ate together in comfortable silence, the kind that comes only when words have already said everything they need to. Later, a hunter came through the forest. He found the wolf lying at the edge of the clearing, so vast a creature that even he, seasoned as he was, could not lift it alone. He stepped into the cottage, saw the table overturned, the kettle blackened by battle, the girl safe in her grandmother's arms. He bowed his head not in greeting, but in reverence. "You've done what few could," he said quietly. The old woman met his gaze. "It had to be done," she replied. Together, the 3 of them set the room to rights. The hunter lifted the table, the old woman steadied the legs, and Red swept the scattered embers back into the hearth. When they finished, the small house looked like itself again, the kind of place where stories might safely end. Then the hunter went out to tend to the beast. He knelt beside it, shook his head at the size, and knew he would need help to see this matter done. So he returned to the village before dusk, and by evening, word had spread of the great wolf slain in the woods, of the child spared, and of the woman who faced the creature and triumphed. By morning, they came in groups, not to scoff this time, but to see with their own eyes the cottage and its keeper. And from that day forward, no one spoke of the strange old woman in the woods. They spoke instead of the brave one, of the woman who stood her ground and saved her granddaughter from the beast. And so, dear dreamer, the story ends, as most true ones do, not with magic, but with understanding. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a small girl standing her ground. Sometimes it's an old woman climbing a stair. And sometimes it's the space between them, where courage passes like light from one generation to the next. And if ever you doubt your own strength, think of them, the girl in the red hood and the woman who refused to fade. Because bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's the act of love that refuses to leave. Now, the forest is quiet again. The door is closed. The stew is warm, and the world in this moment is safe. Good night, from me and from the girl in the red hood. Sleep now. You are safe. You are loved. You have been listening to Nicki Woo Cozy Stories, written by Nicole T. Woodard. May your dreams be gentle and your sleep be deep.